Welcome to the Budget Policy Workshop for Okaloosa County Board of County Commissioners, Tuesday, April 15th at 1:30 in the afternoon. If you would, please stand and join me in prayer. Gracious God, thank you for today. Thank you for the love that you have for us. Thank you for the wisdom that comes only from you. Help us as we talk about the stewardship of this county, as we workshop together. Help us to make your name known, to bring glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Commissioner Goodwin, will you lead us in the pledge?
Yes. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have no speaker cards. Is there anyone from the public desiring to speak in this workshop? Okay, Mr. Hofstad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. As you know, for those of you that have been with us for several years, and for the two new commissioners that have come on board, April is typically the month that we convene with the board in a workshop setting to talk about budget policy going forward for the current or for the planning new fiscal year. So we will cover a lot of ground today. This is a workshop. Please feel free to stop me at points during the presentation if you have questions. I am going to handle the first several slides, and then I will turn some of it over to Sheila to talk about some of the support service functions we have and what we are forecasting for the new year. And then Craig and Jason will have segments related to capital projects where they'll speak to some of the planned capital, the current capital program we have in place and planned capital projects going forward. So with that, I will get started. And again, please, if you have questions, stop me. And between myself and our staff that's here today, we will do our best to answer those questions in preparation for pulling this budget together. This is where we provide information on the current physical health of our organization, our economic outlook going forward, what we are currently programming from my perspective as your administrator based on projected revenues as we know them right now. So with that, I have a number of slides that I am going to, and this remote doesn't work, Nick. Okay, there we go. This first slide is just a general timeline of where we are in the process. Typically on the staff level, I would get together with our OMB office, our Sheila, our deputy county administrator, and HR and some of the support functions where we will send out requests to the departments related to manpower needs, if they have additional manpower needs going into the new year. If we have IT needs, working with Dan's office on some IT upgrades for our departments. And then, other issues such as capital projects, we try and do that on the front end. We have our budget policy workshop, which we're at today. And based on the board's direction from today, I will go into a series of meetings with our department directors really over the next couple of months where we will drill down to each department's budget. I'll have a better understanding of what their needs are. They will have an understanding from my perspective on what we can live with and what we can't live with. And then we will prepare a budget document based on that. We also meet with our constitutional officers during that same time period, get a feel for what the constitutionals are going to come forward with their budget ask. And then that will culminate in a series of workshops we have in the month of July, where that is presented to the board. We gather the board's feedback from that. And in the month of August, we prepare a final budget for presentation to the board in the month of September for a series of 2 public hearings where that budget's adopted. So this budget process is lengthy. It takes several months to pull together almost $750 million budget. A lot of information that we will cover with you in the month of July. This is general overview today. A lot of it's historical on where we've been and where we are. So again, we look forward to the board's feedback based on what you'll hear today. And then we will take that into our departmental meetings here over the next couple of months. The next slide is just a representation of our ad valorem millage rate. This is our property tax rate. The last time that we had to make an adjustment in the property tax rate goes back to the 2017 calendar year. We had a series of issues that combined to force us really to have a small increase in our millage rate. We had missed projections as it related to our cash carry forward position. And at the same time, our jail population increased significantly, which drove our healthcare costs for the jail into the higher tier of healthcare coverage. So before we even stepped into that budget process that year, we were already $3 million in the hole. We've made an adjustment at that time, but since that time, we've held this millage steady for the last 8 years. And very proud to do that each year to lessen that tax burden to our citizens. This next slide is the other component of our aggregate millage rate, which is a combination of our property tax millage, our ad valorem millage, and our MSTU millage. The MSTU millage only applies to the unincorporated areas of the county, so it does not include all of our municipalities in Okaloosa County, strictly those unincorporated areas. And that millage goes to support our MSTU for our parks. So it's our county parks that are included in this unincorporated parks. And the last time we made an adjustment on this millage rate was about 12 years ago, and that was in support of stormwater. This board, the previous board, I should say, several years ago, Lynn, I believe it's almost 10 years ago now, it was during Greg Stewart's time that we actually developed a stormwater utility, but we did not have a companion funding component to that stormwater utility. So what we've done is we've adjusted this MSTU where a portion of the MSTU goes to support those unincorporated county parks. The remaining portion of those dollars goes to support our stormwater program. It only covers the operation and maintenance expense of that stormwater program. Jason can give you the details of that, but it's essentially the salaries and operation and maintenance costs is covered with that. It is not sufficient enough to cover capital funding for major capital initiatives. That is covered under surtax, which we will touch on later. But that has been like our property tax millage, that's been a stable funding source for us. And again, we've held the line on that millage for 12 years. So that results in our aggregate millage rate. The millage rate, we tell you that when we look at our position statewide and we compare aggregate millage rates, we're one of the very few counties in this state that have an aggregate millage of under 4. Local option fuel taxes, I just want to touch on this briefly. Local option fuel taxes fund a large portion of the Public Works budget. Again, this is something that Jason can speak to and Scott Bitterman can speak to. We will not get into the details of that today, other than to say Florida statute allows up to 12 cents to be allocated to local option fuel taxes. This county allocates 10 of those 12 cents. So if you look at this slide, we allocate all of the first local option gas tax, which is up to 6 cents. We levy that entire 6 cents. The second LOGT is 1 to 5 cents, of which we levy 3 cents. And then the 9 cent the gas and diesel tax is a 1 cent sales tax, which this board also levies. And these taxes go to support the majority of our Public Works budget. We have seen a leveling off of the local option fuel taxes. A lot of that's based on fuel economy of vehicles today, the presence of electric vehicles, which obviously do not consume gas or diesel, so that impacts your fuel taxes as well. Even though Florida is a growing state and people are moving here daily, that fuel tax continues to be a level funding source. And, at some point we have to address, is this the proper mechanism to assess impact to our state roads? But really that's a discussion for the state of Florida on another day. State surtax, or excuse me, sales tax, which includes both of our local option, local government half-cent sales tax and our local surtax. Our local government half-cent sales tax, that is a state formula that was developed back in the early 80s with the state of Florida. And the state has a formula whereby they allocate a portion of that 6% state sales tax to all of the 67 counties. So we get a portion of that collected throughout the state. That funding source has been somewhat stable, but based on what we look at, which are our year-to-date numbers in comparison to the previous year, if you see this chart, that 2025 estimate shows pretty good growth in that tax revenue, but based on our year-to-date comparisons, we're actually seeing that lagging about 2.5%, which would be consistent with what we're hearing throughout the state. So while we're hopeful that we meet that projection by year's end, there is a chance that will be flat or slightly less than what is projected. Surtax, I talked about this earlier. This was a huge win for this county when this was passed in the 2018-2019 timeframe. We did not have a separate funding source to tackle a growing capital need in this county, whether it was on the public safety side with emergency communications equipment, whether it was transportation and the Southwest bypass. There were a number of major projects, both on the stormwater side. I think, Jason, that a few years ago we had a deficit of about 65 million in immediate stormwater need, and we didn't have a companion funding source to be able to fund all of those capital needs. We took this to the voters of Okaloosa County. We passed this with about 65% of the county vote, which was a big win for our county. And I think our residents would agree, based on the work product that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years, we have taken on a tremendous amount of capital need in this county and done what we told the residents we were going to do. That funding source, although it's grown significantly over our original estimate, we anticipate a leveling off, maybe a slight decrease in that funding source for next year, but very slight. It's still outpacing what our original estimates are. And we've been able to take on additional capital projects that were not contemplated as part of this first issuance of this local surtax. So very beneficial funding source for us here in Okaloosa County. And as I speak of state or sales surtax here locally, we are fast approaching the time where it's going to be time to renew this funding source. This will require that it be put back in front of the voters for a referendum. We are looking to potentially launch this initiative next year. That's slightly ahead of when it would be due, but there's some benefit to doing that and getting that done early. There is an OPAGA, which an OPAGA is an arm of the state that we are required as local governments, anytime we have one of these major tax initiatives, that we have to complete an audit with that state department. We had a successful audit back several years ago when we instituted it. We expect the same this time. But I know Jason and his team and Craig as well are working on a needs list for needed projects going forward. Our plan would be to present that to the board sometime later this year, later this summer, get the board's approval for the proposed projects that we would recommend. And if the board endorses that, our plan would be to develop an ordinance through our county attorney's office and bring that back to the board sometime around this time next year, in April of next year. Timing, there are critical timing components of these type of initiatives. We've got to get an ordinance approved by the board. Once that's done, we have to push that information to the state OPAGA office, because they have to step in and perform their audit, and that takes time to do that. So we need to leave ourselves several months to complete that process, with the hopes of we would be prepared for a November 26 referendum to put this in front of the voters. So that is our plan going forward, but more on that as we get deeper into this budget season and you get some of the department presentations. State revenue sharing and communication services tax. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this other than to say this is one of those funding sources where we've seen, again, some leveling off of that funding and a slight decrease in that funding source. Both of these funding sources, specifically the communication services tax, is, more and more folks have veered away from landlines are a thing of the past, and that's where you made your money in the communication services tax years ago, and everybody's going wireless. Some of this is tied to wireless, but you don't see the revenue stream that you once would see with these land-based services. So that funding source has fallen off a little bit, but based on some of our year-to-year analysis or month-to-month analysis, I'm hearing from finance that we're actually seeing a little bit of growth in that communication services tax. So might see some slight growth in that one. State revenue sharing, we would expect to see that state revenue sharing fall off just based on what we're seeing as our month-to-month comparison in collections. So that has fallen off pretty substantially, up to about 10% based on what the projections were. So we'll continue to track that, but we are hitting that point in the year where we see the greatest growth in these type of sales taxes that are, tied to economic conditions. And obviously, the state of Florida experiences tremendous tourism growth in the spring and summer months, and that's when we see the increases in these fees. So we remain hopeful that we'll see some gains in that, but I do expect to see that fall off a little bit. This is also one of those funding sources, much like the state sales tax, that we use as bond indebtedness. So this is our pledge against our bond debt. These two funding sources, and that is more than sufficient to cover what bond debt we do have and what bond debt we do project going forward. Port revenue, this is another, as Clerk Embry will tell you, this is another one of those funding sources, somewhat frustrating for us in that it is for years now been woefully inadequate to cover the cost of, whether it's the state attorney's office, public defender, those functions of the court, that we do have a statutory responsibility to fund a portion of that. We would like to see this, especially the recording fees, that $2 fee. We would like to see the state take action on that to increase that. But every time we have presented that as a recommendation to our legislative contingent, it has not been generally supported by the legislature. So that fee continues to be inadequate to fund those court-related operations. And when that happens, that burden falls on the BCC to fund that gap. So we would expect, based on the projections and what we're seeing, that once again we'll have added costs as it relates to those court functions when we get into our budget workshop presentations in July. Traffic court and court assessments, little better forecast on those funding sources as it relates to the IT fees. So not as much of a fall off in those funding sources as the others, but those funds are restricted to certain operations. And, as it's described in here in your PowerPoint presentation, it's specific to court-related functions. So that certainly helps us from a budget perspective, that's general fund funding that we do not have to come up with to make up the difference. So we hope that trend continues and we see some growth in those fees. General fund, I do want to touch on this because this has been an area where we've made significant gains over the last decade in our general fund reserve. 10 plus years ago when I stepped into this role, we had woefully inadequate general fund reserve. And a lot of that was due to the economic recession of 2007, 2008, which, impacted all entities across this country, impacted budgets, and a lot of governmental agencies, much like ourselves, had to make up some of the shortfall in funding with our general fund reserve. And we continued to dip into that reserve to the point where, at one point we had 5 million, a little over 5 million in general fund reserve for, $500 million operation. That's not sustainable. So we made a commitment several years ago. We did some policy changes on how we calculate our cash carry forward position as a percentage of our budget or in addition to our budget. So we stopped that practice. So any of those fees that are unspent at the end of the year, we rotate that into our general fund reserve. We don't use that as a calculated component of our overall budget. Holding the line on spending, unnecessary spending, and trying to make sure that we had a concerted effort in building that general fund reserve each year. And as you can see from the graph, I mean, we've grown that fund to pretty much stable at 36 million the last couple of budget cycles. And we had a large infusion of dollars based, post-COVID with ARPA dollars and some other dollars that rolled into a lot of governmental agencies, and that helped us further prop up those general fund reserves. This slide's a little busy in that it gives you all the components of how that reserve is made up. Sheila's done quite a bit of work with both our finance team and Warren Avert and identifying those funding sources, how they can be used. And, from that, we typically come to the board with a list of needs for funding, project funding, that do not impact what is the board's policy, which is trying to always maintain at least 2 months of operating expenditures in reserve. So, very happy to report that for several consecutive years now, we've met that funding policy. We'll meet it again. Typically what we look at is as far as that general fund reserve target for us is a combination of those assigned, unassigned, and unrestricted fund balance numbers. That makes up the bulk of your general fund reserve. Got another slide in here that Sheila's going to talk to later that'll give you a little more information on that. But it's certainly my goal to continue to maintain that reserve and grow that reserve as best we can to match those expenses on the expense side. So that'll be a goal as we move into the budget to make sure that we maintain those levels. Debt service fund, I spoke just briefly about this earlier as far as what we use to pledge against our debt service, and that's typically our state sales tax and our state revenue sharing. You heard from Angela Ballant today relative to our debt position here in Okaloosa County and where we kind of stack up against our benchmark counties, and we are in very good shape. We have a high debt ceiling. We've made wise investments. We've paid down debt versus where our debt position was 10 years ago. But, there still remains capital needs that we must address. And this board heard from staff here just the last meeting about some capital needs that we have, whether it's the Public Works facility, working with the tax collector and the new administrative office that they're looking to build there on the north end of Crestview. So those projects are looming. We've got some renovation work we've got to do to the Bracken building. So that is captured in that last highlighted block you see in that 48 million. Still has limited impact on where we are from a revenue perspective and what we pledge against our debt. So we're in very good shape where that's concerned. Another component of this is defeasing some of the earlier bond issuances. You'll see that 2014 sales tax revenue bond. That was for this county administration building. We did an expansion of the sheriff's office, and that was the initial funding for the Crestview Courthouse. So because of the current market conditions, we're in very good shape to be able to defease that bond debt and capture that in that 48 million, which is tremendous savings to this county going forward. Major enterprise and special revenue funds. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with this other than to say your enterprise funds are very healthy. The only real enterprise fund that we struggle with from a revenue growth perspective, and that's largely due to the collection mechanism in place, and that's EMS. I will tell you, for every dollar of fee that we bill out for EMS, we collect somewhere around 37 cents on that. And that's just the nature of that type of operation. That coupled with, this union presence that developed a few years ago and having to stay competitive, and we needed to be competitive. We had to contribute additional general fund dollars to prop that division up, make us competitive, limit that increasing turnover rate that we were seeing, and we've made great inroads into doing that. But other than that, I mean, your tourism fund continues to be a growing fund, although, somewhat leveling off on some of those revenues, but growth nonetheless. Water and sewer, Mike and Mark do a great job on the water and sewer department as far as programming what their expense needs are, coupling that with their rate model and updating that rate model as necessary to meet those growing capital needs and our pressing and ongoing operation and maintenance needs, excuse me. So good growth in that fund as well. Same thing with airports. Tracy and his team have done a tremendous job in paying off debt and being a debt-free airport, while at the same time continuing to bring in FAA funding and DOT funding to advance major capital needs at VPS, our airports. So growth there as well. And then our solid waste fund continues to show growth, and all good signs from our enterprise funds. And certainly we don't have the same concerns there that we do with our general fund and those limited dollars. Current fiscal year budget facts. Again, this current budget year we're in is a $648 million budget. And that budget continues to grow. That $648 million represents about a 3.5% increase over the previous year. Of that $648 million, $176 million of that is our general fund component. So your property taxes make up about, I think, Sheila, 115 million of that. So the balance of that is your state revenue sharing and your state sales tax and other fees associated with the general fund. But the bulk of your general fund budget is made up of property taxes. But that's only 27% of your budget, and that funds more than just BCC operations. We fully fund the sheriff's department. We fully fund the SOE. We partially fund the clerk. We partially fund the property appraiser, and the tax collector takes his cut off the top with what he brings in and tax fees. So again, millage rate 3.8308 mils. My plan and my direction to our staff is hold the line on that and bring me an expenditure plan going forward that contemplates keeping and holding the line on that property tax millage. The same thing with our MSTU. Again, seeing growth there, so I think that's sufficient to cover our operation and maintenance needs on the stormwater side, and then operation and maintenance and some of our capital needs on the unincorporated county park side. So we look forward to continuing to maintain that 0.299 rate there as well. The board approved a 4% COLA last year. That impacted over 1,000 employees. We also had an FRS increase, slight increase of a couple percent last year. We did add some additional full-time equivalent positions, new positions. The bulk of those were in water and sewer, TDD, and we had some immediate staffing needs and corrections we had to address as well. Again, property and values increased this past year 7.5%. That equated to about 7 million. So this year's projection is about 6.4%. So we're starting to see a slight decline in that, what was several years ago double-digit percentage growth in property tax values. Just starting to see a slowing down of the property value increases. This slide is just a summary of how the funds are distributed. So you can see, the general fund constitutes 27% of that budget. Your enterprise funds, 34%. Then you have some other small funding sources. You see on here special revenue funds. It's about 33.2 million, but a small percentage. But that's your unincorporated county parks, your judicial innovations, the Chattahoochee Bay Estuary Program, prisoner benefit fund. Those are the type of funds that are included in that budget. And then you'll also see even smaller slice, the internal service funds, somewhere around 1% of the overall budget. But that's your risk management department and your fleet division of public works. Economic outlook, again, I touched on this earlier. As it sits currently, the property tax valuations are coming in at about 6.4%. Now, Mr. Busby will not finalize those numbers for another month or so, month and a half, but it has been holding fairly steady at 6.4, 6.5%. We hope that remains the case. We know that that'll generate a little over 7 million in additional revenue to support all of those competing functions within the general fund. I talked about the leveling off or slight decrease in our state sales tax, fuel taxes, and state revenue sharing. No need to touch on that again, but we are seeing some leveling off of those funding sources. And then, as many of you know, there were several of us went to Tallahassee here last month, and there is legislation floating around Tallahassee could further impact our ability to raise revenue and further restrict revenue income into this county, whether it's through additional homestead exemption, talk about doing away with property taxes. Those are significant impacts to county and municipal budgets that we would have to find some type of companion funding source to make up that difference, or you're talking about service elimination. But we will see what comes out of Tallahassee as this session comes to winds to an end. Capital needs supported by general fund. We touched on that slide earlier, and the additional 48 million that we will enter the bond market to take on some additional general fund supported capital projects. We do expect an increase for the first time in several years in our health insurance rates. There's a slide that Sheila will touch on later that'll talk about health insurance. Utility expenses continue to remain somewhat stable, so we're not expecting huge increases in our utility costs, and then we're not projecting any increase in workers' compensation as it relates to impacts to the general fund. Recent accomplishments, and I'll try and be brief with this. As this board knows, we migrated away from the traditional vacation leave and sick leave type of leave-based plan to a PTO system plan here last year. That was one of those impacts to the general fund reserve that the board had planned for, a little over $1 million in payouts. But that will certainly help us going forward as it relates to liability on the books for compensated absences, because that was a big liability that we carried on the books, because you've got employees that have worked for this county 20, 25, 30 plus years that had been recipients of that leave system and the payout methodology upon retirement and separation. And so that we had to carry those compensated absences and that liability on the book. By going to this PTO system, we have eliminated that with a defined cap versus this unending cap on sick leave, and then the annual leave payout. So that's going to be beneficial to us in the long run. The board has been, this board has been very accommodating and understanding as it relates to our employees, and that's what makes this county run smoothly and run well, and trying to remain competitive, because there was a point in time in a season where we were highly uncompetitive, and we were losing employees left and right. Turnover rate near 30%, and we had to right that ship. And that was based on this board's direction and understanding that. And we've made some salary adjustments over the last 5 budget cycles that have helped to turn that number around. And I think, Kelly, we're somewhere around 18% in turnover rate now. So we've made significant inroads into that turnover rate and compensating employees for fairly for what we asked them to do. So we appreciate that from the board, and we'll have recommendations going forward on what we're looking at as far as a COLA for next year. Org chart changes. The board's made some recent org chart changes, and you did some mid-year org chart changes. I think that'll make this organization more effective and more efficient. We're starting to see that already. Sheila has worked hard with Brittany and our attainable housing strategy and how we address affordable, attainable housing here in Okaloosa County. And so we'll certainly touch on that as we enter into our budget workshops. And then infrastructure and capital project upgrades. I can't say enough about what has been done in this county in the last decade, where we had a period there of, several decades where we did not address adequately what were needed infrastructure upgrades. But through wise planning, the wise application of debt, we've been able to take on projects, whether it was building this building 10 years ago and consolidating a lot of our county functions into one office, where I think we were paying at the time, Jason, 700 plus thousand in annual lease fees for our constitutional offices. So we eliminated that annual lease fee in lieu of pledge against debt service and combined all these offices in a one-stop shop. Looking at doing the similar thing up north with what we're doing with the tax collector and property appraiser and their new facility as well. So that's wise planning. The Southwest Bypass and some of the transportation projects that have been completed. We 4-laned 123 a few years ago. We did the flyover at Hurlburt Field. Jason has tackled the 50 and 5 program and his team and capping and paving 200 miles of dirt road in the north end of the county. We're soon to have that project complete and all of those roads capped. I mean, that's visionary, and that's stuff that had it's just classic case of kicking the can down the road. It just timing wasn't right, but yet that problem continued to grow and grow and grow to the point that our residents, we were hearing from them, whether it was stuck in traffic or, access to county facilities. We've taken that on and we've made great strides in this county in addressing those needs. And I think that's something certainly appreciated by our residents. Budget policy discussions, and I'm going to turn it over to our staff to wade into some of these other items. Employee compensation and benefits. I will tell you, and Sheila will speak to this shortly, but just based on what I'm seeing from revenue projections going forward, what will be recommended out of my office is a 3% COLA. I just think, we've got to keep pace with what we're seeing as far as our revenue. And, we don't have the strong revenue growth that we've had in the past few years. But, we look at, we look at, some of the economic indicators that we're looking at right now on the national level and how that could impact us. I think the prudent thing to do is to look to a potential 3% COLA. And now look, if these revenue projections change and we can do better, we'll certainly bring that back to the board. But right now, I'm not expecting that based on the economic indicators I'm seeing. Health insurance premiums, we will see an increase in that. I'll let Sheila speak to that. But we have been we have benefited greatly from some changes we made in our insurance program and the people that we have that work for us that advocate for our insurance needs, to the point where, where we had just year over year double-digit increase in healthcare costs. We've been able to hold the line on healthcare costs for the last few years, but we're more than likely going to see an increase this year. The fortunate thing for this county is we've been a benefactor of ProShare dollars that have come back to us from our insurance carrier. Those ProShare dollars have been set aside for this very need. Should we have to come up with additional monies to cover the cost of rising healthcare costs, we've got that money in the bank. Service delivery, more property, more land equals got to have more resources to do that. And that'll be part of our budget presentation as we go into the coming months, addressing those manpower needs. Staffing enhancements, obviously you've got to have staff when you grow like this county's grown. ERP system, I'll let Sheila and Clerk Embry speak to that. That has been an initiative that's come out of the clerk's office, and it's again taking advantage of technology and leveraging technology to the benefit of the county and all of our collective functions, but I'll let them speak to that. Nonprofit funding allocation, my recommendation to the board is to hold the line on your nonprofit funding allocation. I wouldn't recommend growing that right now based on what I'm seeing from revenue projections. Capital needs, we touched on that. We do have some pressing capital needs, but we've made great strides. But there are needs on the horizon, whether it's building a new jail or a new, expanding our roadway network. We still have some capital needs going forward. General fund reserves, I have a slide that we speak to that. And finally, millage rate, and it's my recommendation to this board, as it's been the last several years, to hold the line on our property tax millage and our MSTU millage. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Sheila to present the next few slides.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As these are budget policy discussion items, I do encourage you to ask questions as we go along, or if you have any feedback or direction that may be different than what our recommendation is, it would be great to hear that, as it will impact the departmental budgets moving forward. So as Mr. Hofstede mentioned, the board has made great strides in adjusting salaries for employees over the last several years. On this slide, you can see to the right is a historical 10-year look back on each year's adjustments that are made during the budget season, with the exception of one mid-year adjustment, which occurred in 2023, where the board did offer a 3% mid-year adjustment. And at that time, we were seeing almost every local government in this area doing those mid-year adjustments. So as Mr. Hofstede, mentioned, because we are potentially facing some market volatility and some uncertainty about our current economic climate, we are recommending a 3% COLA at this time. We will continue as the budget process moves forward to monitor revenue forecast, evaluate any legislative proposals that may impact county revenue sources and other economic data. And should we feel that we are in a better position, we may adjust that as the budget process advances. One option that the board may wish to consider in the event that our outlook does improve is we have at some point in the past done what we refer to as a performance-based merit. And so the board could consider, for example, adding an additional 1% that employees could be eligible for when their performance is considered exceptional by their supervisors. And so again, at this time, a 3% with the potential that we may come back and update you on potentially that additional 1%. And as John mentioned, we have seen improvements in our turnover rate. And so, for example, when we concluded the end of fiscal year 2023, our turnover rate was 23.2%. And with the end of fiscal year 2024, that had dropped down to 18.4%. And we are also making headway with our employees with less than 1 year of service. We were seeing employees come in and leave fairly quickly within that year. And so we do feel like our salary adjustments and this shift to the PTO flexible plan has helped with that. And again, HR does recognize that, money is not everything. And so as you'll hear during the departmental budget workshops, there's been a lot of focus on retention, training opportunities, improving the quality of life for employees, work-life balance, such as utilizing flexible schedules when possible, and other similar initiatives that we focused on. Any questions on that slide? Okay, moving forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, go ahead.
I just had one question about the potential merit-based stipend that you discussed with the 3% COLA for this year, perhaps I think if I understand this correctly, perhaps an additional 1% merit-based moving forward if their supervisors are consider, their work exceptional. Is there a plan in place already, like a program in place already that that puts the framework there for merit based increases?
So the answer is previously we had a very detailed performance evaluation process that each year employees would get a scoring of, underperformance, satisfactory, exceeding performance. And what we found was that method of employee performance valuation was really not helpful in us moving the needle in performance, because what we would find is pretty much everybody got exceeding performance, because sometimes those conversations are hard to have. So we actually did away with that method of evaluation, and we've replaced it with what we call our retention interview. And that's an opportunity for the supervisors and employees to have a much more valuable conversation about why do they come to work every day? What could they do as supervisors to make their job better? What goals does the supervisor have for the employee? What goals does the employee have for themselves? What would it take to keep them here? And so utilizing that information it actually helps that employee, know that their concerns are being held, and for the supervisors to identify ways in which they can help that employee be successful. And so in talking about a merit, performance merit, how would we do that if we don't have those, on hand annual performance reviews? And the way that we propose to do that is each supervisor would go through that exercise of revisiting those retention forms, identifying any performance issues that they've notated with those employees over the past year. And that would be up to the supervisor to determine, which employees are exceeding that, performance level, and then they would be granted based on that supervisor's evaluation.
Okay, so another question I had is, do we have some kind of threshold for which these supervisors are incentivized to retain the employees by completing a certain number of these or a certain percentage of these? Or is there something to incentivize the supervisors to actually use that data to try to retain employees rather than having, realizing that we've lost one because 3% wasn't enough, let's just say, and, having to hire and retrain and incur that expense instead?
So there is an expectation that every employee has a retention interview done each year. So HR is very good about following up with those supervisors that may be behind on evaluations, and HR also tracks the feedback in a way that allows them to identify those pain points.
Great.
So in other words, if everybody's saying my health insurance is too high, then that's going to trigger a look at that at budget time.
Great, thank you. That's all I had.
Commissioner Goodwin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just a couple things. One, I appreciate the input on the 3% recommendation cost of living. I think that makes sense. Maybe as we go forward, I'd like to see, objectively how we're coming up with the number. What are we tying it to a national index? Because I think ultimately when we figure out what we're going to pay in a cost of living, increase, it's kind of a function of a couple things, right? Trying to understand the buying power of the dollar and how that's changed over the course of the year, and how we need to adjust it to keep that same dollar with the same buying power. We also have to, contrast that against our ability to pay, right? Our revenues, but I don't think either one of them drives the bus by itself, but I just would like to see how we're coming up with the formula to get the 3%. I'll just say in a non-scientific way, 3% kind of falls in line with what I think we might do, because I know we did go through the two successive increases, including a mid-year increase. And so I think we kind of caught back up a little bit, and agree, we don't need to fall back behind, but we also don't need to get ahead of ourselves too far. We always need to be mindful that, things can change, from year to year that we may not expect. So I'd like to see that. The other thing is, I think merit-based in, performance, increases, or really, I would, instead of looking at them as, merit-based percentage increases, I would look at them as merit-based percentage bonuses, I think is really the more appropriate way to address it. So if everybody gets a 3% COLA, that's just an adjustment to keep their dollars with the same buying power, right? Or to keep their to maintain their buying power. And it's not because you've gone above and beyond, but it is because you're doing what you've been asked to do and you've done it faithfully. So you remain employed, and we're trying to adjust it to keep it at the same level. The merit based, on the other hand, I think it should be a year to year. I'm not really sure we would want to do it as a, well, you're up 4% and that extra percent carries over and over. I would think that would be an annual based type bonus. It's what I think most of our public would think is how merit based works. But I'd like to kind of know how we're handling that and looking at that. The other component of it is, and I understand kind of the old way that we looked at the evaluations, I always found them awkward. They are awkward. I mean, I even remember back in the days, and I don't think I've gotten this in a long time, and I think it's because we got away from it, but, I'd get an administrator's evaluation form, and it always felt awkward to fill the thing out, and so I get it that there's a tendency you may not be getting all of the candid data. The struggle is to find I think a blended methodology that has some sort of there's going to be some component of subjectivity in any evaluation determination, whether or not there's a merit-based bonus included, right? There's no way around it. But to the extent we can build in objective measures, right? And how do you do that in government? I don't know. I mean, yes, I've been around government for a long time, but it doesn't mean I fully understand exactly how to do that. Now, on my private business side, I understand how to look at revenue generation. I understand how to look at cost versus revenue per employee and figure out how valuable they are to the organization from a revenue standpoint, and I can compensate them accordingly. That's not so easy in government. And so I don't have the answer. But that's why we're talking about it, right? But if we could kind of figure out how to get to that, because what I don't want, and what I always fear about with merit-based, because I like merit-based, I actually think our constituents embrace that as kind of the American way, right? But every time we've talked about it, I can tell you I've been approached by folks in different departments, and there's a concern, well, hey, I may not be as liked as somebody else, and maybe I'm not going to get the merit base, or I'm going to be, I'm not friends with my supervisor like other people are, and maybe I don't have the same chance. I don't want that. To the extent possible, I want to eliminate that component of it and purely look as objectively as possible. I understand it will never be purely objective, but maybe, and I guess what I'm saying is, I hear what you're saying about kind of how it's going to work, but I can't really wrap my arms around exactly what that means from an objective evaluation standpoint as we sit here today. In other words, if an employee came to me, somebody that, maybe a 5-year employee that is, a level 2, 3, 4, whatever they worked up to within their division, and they said, exactly how will I be evaluated? I wouldn't be able to tell them that I have my real good grasp on that. So I'd like to be able to do that as we work forward, through this process. So I know that's easier said than done, but I think, obviously this is April, so now's the time to talk about it. Thanks.
We can certainly bring back some of that data that you requested. And yeah, and that's the problem, 1,100 employees, and if you could just separate the human element from it, then we could we could solve that problem. I've got certain occupations here within the county that we could put some objective criteria on it. Sales and marketing position, how many sales leads did you get? Then I've got others, how do I do that on a road tech out in, the road department? And so it's difficult. And that's why we kind of migrated from the one performance evaluation standard that we had, where you've got, now a program where you can get supervisory feedback at the same time you're getting feedback up through the organization from that employee that's being evaluated. But yeah, that's the tough component of it. And the biggest reason why we haven't done this since 2020 was, the COVID year put, the economy in turmoil. And we've spent the last several years since then with these COLA increases to bring all of that baseline salary up where we could we could be at a competitive position, which I think we are now. And now it's a matter of how do you balance what is the general cost for all of us, that cost of living increase, and addressing that, and at the same time recognizing your all-stars and paying them. Because I had that very conversation with the department directors is, if we have a merit-based pay system, not everybody in your department's an all-star. I'm sorry, you've got some that are just standout top performers, and they need to be rewarded and recognized. And you got a middle of the roader that, they're doing everything that you ask them to do. And that's great. But, how do you distinguish between the two? And so that's kind of a burden we put on our department directors that understand, if I've got a merit-based pay percentage that I'm going to program in the budget, whether that's 1%, 2%, or 3%. What I'm not doing is telling Sheila and OMB to plug that 3% in every department's budget. Because, it's got to be a fraction of that, because you're going to have to decide with your supervisory staff, who are those people that are hitting those marks. And so totally get where you're coming from and understand it. And that's, that's a puzzle we continue to try and solve, and how we apply that.
I have a brief question. When did we switch to this retention interview, the employee-based evaluation of the supervisor?
2 years ago. 2 years ago. Okay.
Starting the second year. So this is something that potentially HR could come back with a firm tool of how we're going to evaluate, and we could look at that in the future.
Absolutely. I believe so. I will tell you the feedback I've gotten from, the rank and file that have talked to me about it has been very supportive of this platform versus what we had.
Mhm.
Because that was totally based on, to the commissioner's point, a lot of subjectivity from that supervisor and what that supervisor thought about that particular employee. Where now you're getting, those channels are working both ways now with the program we have in place.
If we could see a guideline of tools, I think that'll help us be able to evaluate better. Instead of bonus, if we could use something like a performance-based incentive, that might be in our county's best interest.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, that, as Sheila said, that potentially might be coming back, but based on what we're seeing with our economic indicators right now and where the national economy is, our recommendation is holding the line on that 3%. If something changes, we certainly want to do better, but
Yeah,
yes,
we're
sir.
glad to hear the recommendation and then see where it can go from there. Ms. Fitzgerald?
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes, sir.
I just wanted to clarify. So you guys are recommending a fixed bonus versus an increase in salary? Was that the recommendation of Commissioner Goodwin?
Well, I think what I was saying is it's two-part, right? The cost
On
of
top of the
living
3%.
would go across the
Sure.
board just to keep the dollar the buying power the same. The merit base, looking at it instead of it being a salary increase, treating it as a bonus, so that it's annually evaluated.
Right. Okay. So I just want to make sure before I address, I want to make sure that I understood what your proposal was.
Sorry.
As somebody who does this in my other life as well, I understand the difficulty of having these types of discussions, but that's incumbent upon the position, I believe. And that's why we have these supervisors in the positions that we have them in, because they're expected, it's part of the job to have those in the ability to sort of do that differentiation and evaluation. I also believe that, as employees perform year to year, I believe that there should become a differentiation in their compensation versus those who year to year don't quite perform to the same standards. And so I think that, I disagree with that. Not going to die on this hill necessarily, but I do disagree that I think that it's already evaluated year to year, and one should earn the wages that they've earned. And based on the sustained performance, then they will continue to distance themselves from their peers, and eventually that leads to promotion and other opportunities as well. And so I think that's an important component of just employment practice as a whole, just being able to have those employees rise, even if they continue to just exceptionally do that job, they're still moving up and they're still gaining ground while we need those exceptional players to remain with us as employees. So that's just one thing. And then the other thing, the question I had, so we're calling this a cost of living increase. When we evaluate, when in the past, when I've evaluated just kind of labor costs and things like that, we base it on a cost of labor index that's kind of, I guess some actuaries in the government or whatever come up with those numbers. How does the 3%, understanding it's a cost of living increase, how does it relate to the cost of labor increase in this region year to year?
I can't answer that today, but happy to do a little bit more work on that and get some statistics.
Okay, thank you. Just that, I mean, that's how we remain competitive, right? Is just to not just base it on the cost of living, not just base it on, inflation or other indicators or even revenue that comes in, but to base it on, obviously that's a driver, but based on the cost of labor regionally, to help us stay competitive among our peers.
Commissioner Cox?
So I had previously understood this to the 3%, the advisement to be that was to hold our position on the 3%, hold the line on the 3% COLA to allow the cost of living allowance. And if the market volatility were to change and stabilize, that we would revisit the ideas of things like merit-based bonuses or performance-based incentives, if you will. But is that not the case? Are those not two separate scenarios?
It is two separate. So currently it's a 3% COLA. And I'll just say, Mr. Hofstad may want to add to this. For whatever reason in local government, I think what you've found is, at least in this area, the increase in salaries that employees would get each year was typically just called a COLA, whether it was truly done in a way that a COLA should be based on the CPI may or may not be the case. But generally speaking, you wouldn't see like you're going to get a step increase just because you've been here and a COLA. It's generally just been a 3, a 4, or 5%, with the exception of several years where we were kind of lean, where we really just had to adjust, like you get $500 increase in your pay this year. So definitely two different items for now, recommending the 3%. And then in the event that we feel like our budget can support that additional 1% add-on, we would come back to the board at one of the budget meetings with those specific details. And we can certainly get additional feedback from each commissioner regarding what that might look like.
Okay, so further to that, then what I understand this to be is just, this is simply the COLA, and this is irrespective of any, individual contracts or whatever we might have, employment contracts we might have with somebody to have stepped them up, gradually on an individual hire basis. Is that correct? I mean, any of those are separate from this. Is that right or not right?
Well, no, you don't have any contract positions in the county other
Okay.
than my position. So
Okay.
the rest of them fall under our compensation plan for all employees.
Okay, so this 3% will be a unilateral thing for all employees. Okay, thank you. Questions answered.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, the next slide is on the health insurance. And I'll just mention, it is listed here that this 15% increase is really a worst case projection. We don't have our final numbers yet, but based on our medical loss ratios through, I believe, February is the last month that we have available. We did have a worse medical loss ratio year than what we'd seen in the last few years. We were able to hold premiums steady, or in some cases even decrease them over the last 5 years. But again, because of recent claims experience, our consultant has recommended that we plan for a 15% increase. Now, what will happen is once we've got about 2 more months of medical loss ratio reports, that may soften a little. It could fall down to 10% or 12%, but just for budgeting purposes right now, we're going to plan on a 15% premium increase. That equates to about 1.6 million. Of course, that would be spread among the different funds. And what our recommendation is because we are holding about 3 million in pro share refunds from the last couple of years, those pro share refunds are there for purposes such as this to offset premium increases. So we would recommend that half of that premium increase come from those pro share refund reserves, and the other half be met, again with the respective fund level. And so I will note that we will be putting all of our insurance benefits out for competitive procurement next year. But for now, this is what we are seeing for our health insurance. And we are in a good position, to potentially, I hate to say negotiate with these providers, but if they think that there's a chance that we may go self-insurance or go to another provider, we may be able to dial that premium increase back even further. So Ms. Bird works very closely on that. And so I think we'll be able to give you an update at our July budget workshops on where that came out.
Could you give me a guesstimate of the hit to the employee for this increase?
So our recommendation is actually to hold the employees' premium steady and have the county offset that increase.
Thank you.
And that's the benefit of what we've been able to collect over the years and pro share rebate. Because, some of you that are sitting on this commission, you can remember the days when we got no pro share rebate. We've been getting that in the last few budget cycles. And the thing about that, this got to inure to the benefit of those that participate in the program. So what better way to utilize that funding source than to make up for that deficit? For far too many years, we went through the process and the boards being as generous as they could, but based on tough economic times, we'd give a 2% increase and they'd see their healthcare costs go up. And the next thing you know, any increase in pay was washed out. And we want to continue to remain as competitive as we can. So certainly our recommendation is to tap into that source to make up that difference.
So, Mr. Chairman, sorry, just so, I'm sorry, Trey.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understood because I think I just heard you say that. So of the half of the 15% is going to be made up with pro shares, and then the other half is going to be paid by the county for the employees. Was that correct? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Goodwin?
And I just wanted to clarify, so you're expecting that wouldn't include people that are buying up to a family plan or buying up to a more premium plan. They still might see increases, right?
So it's all plans, and we would recommend that the employee share for all of the 3 levels remain the same.
Okay, so regardless, if you're buying up to I can't remember what the tiers are, but whatever they are, that would remain the same for the following year.
Correct.
Okay. And then the RFP that's going to go out for next year with a new contract, when would the new contract become effective?
I believe we lock in our contract amounts and rates in the summertime or May, effective October 1.
So we would be looking at a new contract October 1 of 2025 or 2026?
2026. And so we would put out the procurements in the spring, summertime, and then we would know what our rates are going to be next budget season leading into fiscal year 27.
So for the discussions today, the RFP really, it's a future looking thing, but it's not going to affect how we're budgeting right now.
Correct. It's
Got
just an informational item. Okay, so the next slide, as Mr. Hofstad mentioned earlier, leading up to today's budget policy workshop, we do have our departments assess their manpower needs and, depending on, their operations or other factors, they will put forward personnel request. So really, I'm not going to cover all of those personnel requests that came in today, mainly just wanted to kind of highlight those general fund supported requests, but also, as this board knows, with every piece of property that we purchase or that we improve for additional services, that does require, additional staff to maintain those properties, whether it's custodial service, whether that's, maintaining the properties. And so we have seen a fair amount of facilities management staff requests that come in this year. Of course, we do look to fund those as appropriate, whether that's with TDD dollars, whether that's with the Parks MSTU dollars. And so we do the best to offset the cost of those personnels in the fund that the property was purchased under. So just to note that you'll be seeing some of those come forward. Within our general fund department, specifically Veteran Services, County Extension Office, and Information Technology, we did have at least one personnel request in each of those departments and two in IT. And what we're seeing specifically with our Veteran Services Office, we certainly do not have complaints about the level of service from our veterans. I think any one of them would have nothing but great things to say about the experience that they have with our staffing. But I tasked our veteran services manager with, I want to look at counties that have a similar veteran population to us, and I want to know how far those veterans have to travel for appointments, how long their wait time is for appointments, what is their staffing levels, and what I found was that we have a whole lot less staff than those counties. Our veterans have to drive, substantially further, and the wait times for those appointments are substantially longer. And so I just felt like with us having two offices, one in Crestview and one in Shalimar, it might be a good time to potentially look at adding one more veteran services counselor. Certainly, we understand that this is an area, where if times are tough, that we may not be able to do this year, but this is just one recommendation that I asked to be brought forward for your consideration. We did have a long-term volunteer that would assist us in our Crestview office that we no longer have. So I did task our Veteran Services Manager with looking at volunteer programs so that we could have potentially some veterans serving in that capacity. In our County Extension Office, with the opening of the new South Extension Office, in order to staff that Monday through Friday, and to support the growth in our educational programs, we are asking for one additional program technician in the County Extension Office. And then with all of the fiber broadband expansions and for succession planning, we are looking to add 1 to 2 positions in IT. Of course, as Mr. Hofstede will say, we do have to carefully consider each of these general fund personnel requests. And as we have the departmental meetings with staff, we'll look at these with a critical eye. And only those that we feel like are imperative to service delivery levels will stay in the budget and will be brought forward to you at the future budget meetings. Any questions on personnel?
No, your timing is perfect because Commissioner Goodwin's monitor keeps going off and then back on. So I said it's to justify the new position that is to come.
What permission to speak, Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Cox.
I just wanted to say thank you for keeping a close hawk eye on that. I think that veterans have been underserved, and not necessarily by our county, but as a nation for such a long time. And we hear a lot about it, on the front side, of running for office, but we really have the opportunity to see someone taking such a close, careful look at it on the inside. So thank you for that, Mr. Sherrill. I applaud your efforts.
Well, I can't take credit. If it wasn't for our veteran staff telling us, hey, we could use another person, I might not have known that myself because they don't complain, right? I only hear the good comments from our veterans.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you to our veterans.
Okay, so I'm just going to hit the highlights on the ERP system, and then if Clerk Embry or Josh wants to add some additional comments, or if the board has any questions I can't answer. But, in short, if you think of an ERP system, it can encompass really all of your software needs within the county. It can be finance, procurement, planning, payroll, human human resource records, data records and management. And so what we have now currently is a very disjointed system of different parts and pieces that sometimes talk to each other, and sometimes we have issues with that. But our current, financial system we've had for over 20 years, and it basically can't support future updates moving forward. And so there's really no question about having to do something. We're really at the point where we do need to change our systems up. And so working with the clerk, we have consolidated a team of different county and clerk staff to begin looking at what are our needs for an ERP system. We have heard from several ERP vendors about the products that they offer. And what we're doing is our staff are evaluating each of those vendors to determine which makes the sense for the county and all of the needs that we have. The clerk is taking the lead on the procurement process, but of course the board will be supporting the transition from a financial perspective. We have earmarked funding for this ERP implementation and for the year one service fees from general fund reserves. The clerk does understand that this is a big undertaking, which not only will require a lot of staff resources to get this implemented, but also the financial impact is much greater than what we've seen with the legacy systems that we've been using. And so they've committed to me that they will meet with each of you to make sure you understand the need for moving to the system. But more importantly, what is what's the benefit, right? Like from a dollar perspective, what does that investment get the county? How can it improve efficiencies? How can it, help reduce the time that we're taking in processing invoices and things like that? And so, implementation of this is obviously dependent upon the board direction. If the board can provide consensus on moving forward with one of these systems, we would plan that in the fiscal year 2026 budget, and implementation would begin sometime after October 1. Hopefully I didn't mess that up too bad, but Josh or I don't know if the clerk is still here. Okay, there you are.
I think you did a pretty good job, and I appreciate that, Sheila. This is very much a need, not a want. We have exceeded and squeezed out every bit of efficiency out of the legacy systems that we're currently using. We're operating with systems that were built in the 90s, and security is a big concern. On top of that, it is going to build in a lot of efficiencies in the way that we operate, transparency in the way that we conduct business, reporting mechanisms, things that are totally not available to us. And so it would be hard for me to sit here and try to explain all the doors that are going to open once we move into this new system. It will be a phased implementation. We're going to try to work heavily with finance to make sure, that we're not trying to implement at the same time we're going through next year's audit. But this is very much something that has to be done, and we have seen this coming for a long time. And I think now is a good time to pick it up and try to strike while the iron's hot, so to speak. And I don't know if I missed anything, or Josh has anything he wants to add. He's kind of been leading the effort on evaluating the systems, but it is very much something that has to be done.
Are you suggesting you would have it implemented prior to the auditing season next year?
No, this is 12 to 18 month implementation. It would be done in phases, depending on the pieces that the county wants to implement on their side. But you're talking HR, OMB, grants, contracts, purchasing, all the pieces under one umbrella. Whereas now this is going to replace at least 8 other systems with one system, which is going to bring everything underneath. Currently, right now, if I go into the general ledger and I want to see the details of a transaction on a dollar amount, I have to go into another system to look at the supporting documents. that justifies that transaction. And it's very cumbersome. It's not efficient at all. And it makes it very difficult for reporting and those types of things and digging things out. It's going to be a huge lift countywide. But at the end of the day, once we're implemented and in, it's going to make audit season so much easier. It's going to be better for the commissioners in understanding different financial aspects of the county. You'll be able to run your own reports and figure out if you want to know something, it'll be at your fingertips.
Commissioner Goodwin?
Thank you. And Clerk Embry, appreciate you helping explain that, and Sheila as well. Because I'll tell you, when I read the slide, I was like, well, I don't really know what it is they want to buy for $2 million, but I'm sure it's important. They wouldn't be asking. But so as I understand it, and I think you started to answer that question. So it's really largely financial management systems, and it would be using a single program that will replace it's software. Largely is what we're talking about buying is software. And it will replace some multiple older different softwares that don't talk to one another.
Correct.
And your office will be one of the primary users, as well as various select county departments.
Yeah, so it incorporated in this is the financial software for the county, which is something that we control, but it is a county product. And I can assure you the last thing that I wanted to do, 4.5 months into my first term was to come to the board and ask for something. But this is something that we have seen coming for a long time. And it is something that needs to be, it's born out of necessity. It's not, it's not a want. It's something that we have to do. At some point, we have to do it.
No, and I appreciate that. And I imagine it would be replacing what are probably some archaic procedures and programs that we're using that are probably outdated.
Yes.
Will there be any opportunities through this? Understand kind of how it links the different parts of data to give you kind of this one platform to see all aspects of a transaction, right? And that'll be a really powerful tool. Are there going to be ways to make some of our financial data even easier to access? Obviously not, there's certain things you'll want to protect, but I didn't know if there's like a module in it that will allow, the outside world to be able to see things, or at least produce reports that can be posted where people can see data.
Many of these systems that we've evaluated do have a public facing piece that would allow them to go in and look at transactions, or if they were curious about, funding mechanisms or where certain funds came from, they would be able to do that. Did you understand that correctly too? I mean, there is a public facing piece to that, which is along the lines of what, the state is kind of pushing towards right now, is the transparency piece of it.
Right.
And, I said at the last meeting, the best way to be accountable is to be transparent. So it does have that mechanism and that piece in there too.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the good part, I think we've demoed 5 vendors now, and I think the good part about every vendor is they have dashboards, and I mean, we're having to utilize outside dashboards now to connect to our financial system just to build reports for county departments and or public record requests, so we're having to use an outside entity just to build our reports now. Most of the newer financial systems, ERP systems, have reports in it. And I just wanted to add that it wouldn't just be certain people in the department. With a new ERP, all of your county employees are users, and really they're users by their phone. Most ERP systems now have an app. You download the app, you got your payroll information, your HR information at your fingertips. They even have a process where you request time off from your phone. You don't have to do, I know there's some manual timesheets still happening around the county. Everything can be done from your phone. Employees, we're talking about kiosks being in the office if they don't want to use their phone. So it's really adding every county employee to the current system, where now it's just
what managers and department heads and everybody that approves maybe workflows or whatnot.
And access and input will be based on credentials and by each individual
Absolutely.
login.
Everything at that point is permission based and what you have access to.
So in the process, you guys have already been looking at these. Have you already formed a selection committee and sent out an RFP, or is that like the next step?
We formed a selection committee and we have our final committee meeting tomorrow. We're hoping for a consensus to move forward so we can finish that and pick a vendor that we like, and then we'll go through with contract negotiations and hopefully give you guys a final price.
So the RFP's already been led.
The what now?
The request for proposals or, I mean, have we gone through an RFP?
We're not
Or
going
an
to an official RFP. We're doing, I guess,
Open source.
we're doing an open source.
source.
And I mean,
Last year, we funded $150,000 for the consultant.
Okay,
That's the work that's happened so
got
far.
it.
correct.
That's how you came up with the criteria.
Correct. We were going to hire a consultant. We found out that the consultant was a little more than we anticipated. So I've been sort of doing the consultant work along with county department heads, and we've sort of internally build our committee and doing our own research. And I think we've got I think committee total, we've got 19 members, including clerk and county staff. So I think we got a good committee, and I think we're going to make a good selection.
Well, I appreciate that. And I mean, I'm all for, leveraging the technology for everything we've talked about: efficiency, empowering employees, empowering our public. It sounds like it really has the power, the ability to bring all those things. The one thing, I'm sure you guys have already thought about it, I'll just say it because I feel compelled to say it. Just make sure whatever we do with contracts that we own the data.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Okay. So again, probably goes without saying, but it's just so important.
And we're still, just so you know, I mean, our old financial system is on a server. So we're not even cloud-based with the old financial system, 20 years old, sitting on a server in our office. But when we cut that off, go to a cloud base, it'll be ours. So it's on a server. We'll still have that historical data for as long as we want it.
Good deal. Thank you.
Commissioner Cox?
So I believe I'm on board with this. I mean, I can't imagine any reason to not be on board with this, but there are a couple of little, caveats that I want to address if I can. And since the person I would like to speak to me about these is sitting in the audience, one of the things that that I've struggled with when I've had to do this with different hotel builds and restaurants, et cetera, is the organizational efficiencies that have come up. Have generally been a bone of contention to the staff, for motivating the implementation, right, of those products. I mean,
Right.
Sometimes they feel scared their jobs are going to go away or what have you. I secondarily to that am concerned about the any downtime that might create. And if Mr. San Benedetto could come up here and give me his input or any comfort he may have to give me on the implementation process.
And I know he'll talk more about it, but our goal is not to do away with any staff. Our goal is to give them tools and resources to make their jobs
I
more
understand.
efficient.
I was
So-
not alleging that at all. What I was
just want-
what I was speaking to is that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
impression. Sometimes the impression is the optics is everything role, right? When managing employees, which I almost always try not to do. You have the impression, right, fighting the intention. So if the impression is that, the organizational efficiencies created are going to evacuate jobs, then that's really what we're up against. Not that there's the intent to do that, but rather, how can we best manage, the implementation without any gaps and manage the expectation of the people who will be responsible for helping to implement it. I know that's a loaded question, but I've been through a couple of these now, and it is an issue whether we recognize it or not. I hate to be the person that brings up, the white elephant in the room, but I would like to hear what the plan is for that.
I've never been through an ERP, but Mr. San Benedetto, you want to? address
You're
the
asking
question.
what the implementation plan is going to be?
Um,
I'm not sure I understand your question.
so a little bit, I mean, if you can, you know,
Well, we haven't even picked a product, so we don't really know what the implementation is going
Okay.
to be at this point. At some point, we will determine that and we can present that to you.
do
But
you anticipate a certain, number of your immediate reports and their reports to be tasked with this?
yes,
in
I mean, there'll be a
addition- in tandem
significant
with
data
the
migration
staff?
process.
Okay, so they will be implementing this in lockstep with the individuals that are already, utilizing the old software. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes,
that's what I wanted.
yes. And we will work very tightly with the clerk's office because they'll have a lot of responsibility for their data to migrate, and then our data will migrate, and that will be integrated together. So,
Great.
but it will be a long process, and it won't be perfect, but we'll try to make it as perfect as possible.
Great.
Commissioner Ketchel?
I just wanted to let Clerk Embry know that I'm in favor of it. And I think it's something that will give greater transparency to our citizens. And it will certainly help us be more efficient. So I know you've needed it. And this was a parting gift that Clerk Peacock left for you. So thank you.
Yes, he's the one that really kind of cut through the brush on it, but it is something that needs to be done. And I said that in 2015 when I came to work for the clerk's office, and I was like, what is this? Going into two different systems to get one answer. And it was a little cumbersome.
It's not a green screen.
Yes.
Just about.
It's AS 400.
You are very expensive in your first year.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ms. Fitzgerald?
I think the last slide that I'm going to cover today is our annual nonprofit funding allocation. Each year for the last several years, the board has allocated $250,000 annually. Our nonprofits can apply for funds to support their efforts to either carry out services that may otherwise fall to the county, or reduce the cost of government, or improve the quality of life for residents. I know it's pretty hard to see, but the slide, the right portion of your slide gives a historical look back for the last 4 fiscal years as to the amount of awards per nonprofit. The current cycle is open now with applications due May 2nd. We do have a committee that evaluates each application based on the nonprofit policy as well as the scoring evaluation. And then collectively, that committee will meet to turn in their scores, and those applications will be ranked. And then the recommendation for specific nonprofit funding will be brought to you at, I believe we do that in conjunction with the July budget workshop. But again, just asking to hold that level of funding steady at $250,000. And I'll just remind the board that our museums are now funded by the TDD and not under the nonprofit policy. So I think that helped a few years ago when that adjustment was made.
Chairman.
Commissioner Ketchel?
So thanks for your hard work on that, Ms. Fitzgerald. I know you've put a lot of effort into this over the years. I think I would like to see if there's any consensus to add one more thing, and that is that we don't fund any agency that's serving illegal aliens.
I'm sorry, I don't think that I could support that. Understanding the reason that, one might want that. There's children's services, there's all sorts of things that, these people are in our communities, and I just would not be able to support that.
I mean, I'll tell you, it depends on, I think it would depend on some parameters around that. But I do think our taxpayers have a right to know where their dollars are going. This is coming out of their property taxes. And if their property taxes are being taken by the police power force of government and redistributed to someone who is illegal to our country illegally, I think some people might have a problem with that. I also think those same people also mostly have hearts and probably would not be super interested in, bringing down any sort of retribution upon the heads of children. So it would depend on the parameters. But I do think it's a viable discussion to have, but one we probably have to be careful about how we implement it, But I do think it's legitimate because I will tell you, I get questions from people all the time who don't realize we don't fund the schools. They think they're Okaloosa County schools, and I remind them they're district schools. But you know, there's questions about why do my property tax dollars go to educating people who came to the country illegally? What about the children of people who are here properly? Isn't it a detriment to them? And there's arguments both ways about how that should be handled, and you know, the free lunches and all that sort of thing. But what it says to me is it's enough of a conversation in the community that I think people are asking questions. So I don't dismiss your idea as you know, summarily. I say it's worth looking at, but we got to be cautious about how we would implement it. That's kind of how I feel about it.
I don't believe there's a way to implement that unless we make some major changes to the policy. Because a lot of these, the vast majority of these are funding children functions. Others are funding extreme poverty. I don't see a cold night shelter potentially of saying you can't come in tonight without proving documentation of citizenship. We're helping some of these folks get license identification cards, seeing the opportunity place. But we put Animal Protection League. So I think it would be a hard function to really formulate the policy behind. I don't know that I don't know that it's worth the pursuit at this time, just in my opinion of seeing what we have given to in the last 4 years. I don't know that there's a viable way to make that difference.
Well, you know, Commissioner Goodwin and I have served here for quite a while now, and we both have the same feeling that it is not our responsibility to take tax dollars and to give them to charities. However, we've persisted in that, and we've got a certain amount of money that goes every year to charities, and there are charities listed here that I am sure serve illegals. So considering where the nation has gone, and we've asked them to leave our country, and we're looking at that, I just, you know, feel strongly that ought to be a criteria, but it doesn't sound like we have a
Well,
consensus.
based on what you just said, I did not know that was your sentiment. I am absolutely in favor of not having a nonprofit funding mechanism. I'm okay with not using tax dollars to go towards.
We have been, we've said it over and over
nonprofits,
again.
Unless it's essential
Commissioner.
services.
Commissioner
Essential
Goodwin and I've said
services
it
are
over
different.
and over again.
Sure. Well, that may be a good item to bring forward during a meeting in the future. Is there any more discussion about that?
Very much glad to hear we might have the actual numbers finally, because two of us have said it over and over again. If people want to give privately to certain charities, that's their choice, but why are we divvying up taxpayers' dollars to our charities? of
Commissioner,
choice?
there was a vote on that in the past, and I was the only no vote in that, but it would be good to discuss it again in the future. Ms. Fitzgerald?
Would you like me to prepare a regular BCC agenda item on this topic?
Yes.
Okay. That is all the slides that I have. If it's okay, I'll just go ahead and turn it over to Jason to tackle the capital projects in progress.
Sure. Mr. Autry?
Mr. Chairman, I have one quick thing. I can wait till the end or I can bring it up now, whichever you prefer. Okay. I would like us to consider this. We have always funded a law library. Most recently, a 37-year employee that handled the law library has retired. Considering the fact that these fees, the legislature will not go up on the fees, the $2 fee that funds a lot of the things in the courthouse, I'm wondering if we shouldn't take a hard look and get a recommendation back as to whether we should keep the law library open. If there is a pro se client, they can certainly use a computer that might be set up by a kiosk. I'm just saying that it's time to look at all the places where we don't have extra money to spend. And that's something that we have looked at over and over again as this law library. And every year we funded it because we had an employee, but now that employee is retired, and it's at that moment before they hire somebody new, perhaps, that we can say maybe there's not going to be money for it this year. Just a thought I have.
Sure. And commissioners, if we're going to explore that look, then I would like for you to know that a couple of years ago, I explored the option of putting kiosk inside some of our public libraries to allow people to be able to access a citizen version of Lexis or some other programs that allows them the opportunity of still researching what they need. The function of the law library does not give legal aid. There are functions for legal aid. It simply allows the availability to resources. And I think we could take steps to allocate the resources in a way where maybe Destin, Fort Walton, Crestview, potentially Niceville, and I've discussed this with Miss Vicky in the past, and I think there is something to explore if the appetite is there. Commissioner Goodwin, you've sat.
I did, and I would say that the law library board has really worked to try and get the best benefit out of that program as we could under the circumstances. But it has been a struggle. And I'll be honest with you, organizationally, it's a bit of an anomaly in the county, where we had a county employee that worked for the BCC, and yet, it was almost like they were a contract employee to court administration. There was a year-to-year conflict between COLAs for court administration versus what the county was going to do, and it always was an uncomfortable situation to try and deal with. Understanding now we've had a retirement, and I think it's a reasonable time to look at this as whether or not the resources could be allocated differently. Now, in that, there were certain things that at the time Clerk Peacock had really focused on trying to get some mileage out of the money being expended. And so, the use of the law library for notary services, and some other things like that had seemed to help. I think Clerk Embry may have stepped out for a second because he'll probably have some input in this, because he sat in these meetings for many years before Clerk Peacock retired. So I think he's very spun up on the law library. But as you all know, the revenues are not enough, and the board has had to supplement that through general fund. At the time, it was the right interim thing to do, but I still think, I think the law library itself could be probably broken up into different functions. Some of them terminated, some of them dispersed out to places such as the chairman mentioned, through our library cooperative. Because the reality of it is, if you look back to the law library and what it once was, I think actually the lawyers in our community, many of them, especially the smaller shops, would utilize that service. That's just not a reality anymore. And so it's almost like it's a relic of a bygone era. And I think it would make sense to reformat that to a different way that's more, frankly, more valuable for the dollars spent, better return for the dollars spent. Let me put it that way.
Especially for the fact that they won't increase that $2 fee, which frustrates me. And then we have to eat the cost. So I'm sorry, you can't have it both ways. And a notary, for heaven's sakes, we can get notary in the clerk's office. We have notaries here. We can put notaries around counting.
Yeah.
Not to keep a whole office open for it.
So that's my take on it. I think it served a good function for a long time. It became more difficult to find its niche. It was all well-meaning, good folks trying to do the right thing in a changing world.
Just for the public's benefit, the law library was something that is put upon the county as a responsibility to provide to our constituents, to be able to access case law to study and represent their own cases. I am at the conundrum where I understand that there is legislative action that has implemented this, right? And we are under state law to provide it. On the other hand, we seem to always be having to fund it, even though it's provided by the state. The funding is not provided by the state. So I guess what I would like to see is, what exactly is required? What are the parameters that are absolutely required by the state legislature? Because it is a relic. I mean, the frequency of the public using this benefit, if you will, is very, very low. It's not such that I think it constitutes moving forward with this, especially given its overseer's retirement. I like the idea of the kiosk. If that's a legal, legally advisable thing to do, then that seems like the highest benefit to offer our taxpayers, in the place of a law library, and still meet the statute that requires us to have it. I'm not sure, what that input is worth, but I mean, that is my committee. I mean, folks, so the law library is the committee that was assigned to me. I can't say that I'll hate to see it go away, because I don't see a lot of interest in it, other than, just that we are legally required to manage it.
Mr.
So,
Hosted, would
That's all.
you bring this as an agenda item to a regular BCC meeting that we can discuss the future of the law library and be able to have some options for use?
Yes, sir. Do you have a time in mind, or just in the next 30 to 60 days?
Yeah, first meeting of June. would that
Okay.
be Sufficient.
Thank you, Chairman and Mr. Hosset.
That way we can catch it before the budget time.
I'll just note that at the April 30th Law Library Board meeting, that's one of the topics is kind of discussing a recommended path forward. And so I'm certainly planning to attend that meeting and can assist however in the evaluation.
Mr. Autry.
Good afternoon. As you can see on the slide that's up there, this is a representation of several projects that we have that are ongoing. They're currently active now. They will straddle over into the next fiscal year. Just want to highlight a few of them. The wastewater treatment plant up at the Shoal River Industrial Park. As you all know, we're building a facility now. It's going to have 1.25 million gallons per day capacity the day it opens up, with the potential to expand out to 10 million gallons per day. The contract is underway. We're on schedule. Look to finish by December of next fiscal year, which times out, next calendar year, which times out well, because we see development moving forward with the Project Opal site that's out there. The Okaloosa Island water main replacement project. This is one that's kind of neat, because it's the first time we've done some interdepartment work where water and sewer is replacing water lines and sewer lines on the north loop. So these are the subdivision, the residential loops out on Okaloosa Island. They've gone out and done the repair work, and then Public Works has gone afterwards and done the pavement replacement. So not only do they get new water lines, new sewer lines, but they get new roadways with striping out there and some stormwater improvements, which is nice to see. We'll continue to do that for about one loop per year. When I say loop, if you note, like the Starfish and Pelican, they kind of loop back around on the north side. We'll do one of those per year. About $5 million of total worth of water and sewer work in the next few years. Good to see that moving forward. It will improve fire protection. It will improve the safety of the quality of the sewage lines that are out there. So good work there. And out in Seminole, we are looking to do a new well program. This will replace 4 abandoned wells in that location. About a $1.3 million project that we expect to see done by the end of this calendar year to again improve water pressure and flow out in that area. Moving over to infrastructure projects, multi-use paths are sort of the way we're doing roadways now. Fallen Heroes Way up in the Crestview area, you'll notice that project, when it opens up, it has a 10-foot multi-use path on the side of it. On the Southwest Crestview bypass, we'll actually have sidewalks on both sides. The bridge-to-bridge path is literally glowing with enthusiasm as it's moving forward. And then on College Boulevard, we have a state allocation to put a multi-use pathway there that will connect between basically Forest all the way up to where the college is, and allow that to be a highly utilized pedestrian area by getting it off the roadway. Southwest Crestview bypass, I'm optimistic we will see that roadway opened up at the end of this calendar year, which includes the bridge. This does not mean the interchange with I-10. I want to be very clear that that project lags us by about 12 months, but we are in position now to see the northern segment opened up. In fact, if you drive out there now, a portion of the Fallen Heroes Way, the western side, is used as the public roadway now to access the arena landfill. The bridge is coming into shape, and I'll get with Nick to do another update soon, but that project moves forward. $46 million, almost entirely construction funded through Triumph. Really excited to see that moving forward. Tied to that, off of that roadway, we will have the Public Works Growth Management new facility, which is in design now. I'm literally meeting tomorrow with the potential property owner to nail down that exact location so we can see those improvements coming out there. But it is exciting to see these infrastructure projects coming in to improve our facilities, improve the way we move around all throughout Okaloosa County, and as much as important as safety. And then the last little piece not shown on there is this West 98 collector. This is one that has kind of come up in fruition in meeting with our state representatives and talking with Hurlburt and talking with Santa Rosa County staff. We are actually looking to find a way to get a parallel roadway from Hurlburt Field over towards the 87 in the Santa Rosa County area. Okaloosa County is currently working on the West 98 collector, and there is a new project called Connecting the Collectors, which is going to try and tie all this in to see roadway improvements out on the west side of the county. So we're excited about these projects moving forward. There's got a real good communication between the different departments we have in our development side, and we look forward to seeing further improvements as the year moves forward. If you have any questions on infrastructure projects, I'll be happy to answer them.
On the dirt road stabilization, I would like for you to explore those other 8 miles of county-owned properties.
Yes, we certainly, I do have some insight on that. We do think that it is possible to move forward with that. We will have to talk about various ways because there's one little catch with the reimbursement on a past MSBU. But what Commissioner Mixon is referencing is we've talked about, it's about 8 miles of what have been unopened or uncounty maintained rights of way. In other words, they're rights of way that were dedicated to the county but not technically accepted. Therefore, the roads that inside of them are technically privately maintained, and it's kind of got some oddball situations. It's very prevalent in the Triple Lakes area, and we're looking to see if we can make some improvements out there. But we're pulling together an estimate of what it would cost to do all of those roadways, much like we have the dirt road stabilization, to put all our residents that are on public rights of way that are open to level playing field.
I was grateful to see, based on county staff's research, that it's only 8 miles.
Yes.
And I think it is, as far as public perception goes, it's low hanging fruit. It's something that the public's not going to understand the history behind those issues. They're going to look at the map and say, well, this is Okaloosa County's.
It's difficult to understand when you talk to a resident and across the street, they've got a different set of circumstances on a dirt road that they have. And I would add to it, because we have been so successful in our dirt road stabilization program. Again, I want to remind you, it was called 50 and 5. Our notion, or Commissioner Bullis' notion at the time, was let's do 50 miles of dirt road in 5 years. Well, we only did 203 years. So we've been pretty effective at it. Let's see if we can't carry this on for another 8 miles.
But per our research, this is it. If we can finish these 8, the county does not own any other
of rights of rights of way that are opened but privately maintained. There are more rights of way that are unopened. They're just platted. They're paper plats, for lack of a better description. But these are open rights of way. It's about 8 miles, like 8.1, 8.2 miles, something like that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm going to okay, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Crawford.
I'm going to go follow Jason and really just kind of cover some of the same things that many of these projects you're already familiar with. And we've kind of broken them down to tourism projects and administrative projects. I'm not going to go through each one, but I'll entertain questions as we go along. I will highlight a few of those, and that's County Fairgrounds redevelopment. If you haven't been out there lately, the fairgrounds are undergoing a major transformation, and we replaced a lot of the mechanical systems. A lot of the cosmetic aesthetics are all being redone. We have floor plans on the horizon, and I think within the next 6 months, you're going to see a phase 1 essentially complete as far as the existing structures. So that's going to look pretty good. It's going to be a lot more function than what we had. And I think that opens the door for the building that is under design and the new facades that are under design. All those are part of phase one as well. And those will be coming forward, and we should have some good announcements for those coming up. And I think that opens the door for bigger and better things. Some of the phase two and phase three projects that the committee recommended. I think we're really trying to come up with those and plan for those for the upcoming future. So very exciting stuff. Deployment of the SS United States artificial reef, that's moving along well. We had about 80 folks able to go through the vessel. We'll still probably do some special one-on-one tours, but the work progresses. We probably have 30 to 40 individuals there at all times, almost 7 days a week. And so we're very excited, and that's going to have a fall deployment, it looks like, is what we're shooting for. Winter deployment, I should say, would be probably a better term. And we've also started had some initial discussions over the museum aspect of it. As you know, the Red Lobster we have under contract now, that could be the museum. We have other opportunities too. We're trying to have them hone down what they're looking for in the form of future museum, what funds they have available, and really try to better understand where we're headed on that. And I think there's a lot of good news to come forward on that. I'll break off to Cinco Bayou TDD headquarters office. We're under construction already as far as trying to get those offices cleaned up, ready to use. I will report to you that the building is in relatively good shape, which is what we had noticed from the beginning. It already has Cat 6 wire. We don't have to replace all the carpet tile. We don't have to replace every office, paint every office. So we're able to move very quickly. I think you're going to see the second and third floors occupied quicker. And then probably a more major lift on the first floor as far as redevelopment and creation of offices there, but it's progressing right along. I'm going to switch over to the other column, and that is administrative projects. The 800 megahertz project. That project is about 3 years in now. It got delayed for a while. As you know, we tried to find all the sites, and we made the bold move of owning our own sites. So that helps us through this initial phase and this initial 10-year radios, but it also helps us for retooling in future years down the road. So we have 12 sites that we either own or we were given free by various partners that we have in the community. And I will tell you that the sheriff's office is on it, EMS is on it, corrections, we're on it, right? Okay, seen yes. So we're working with all the fire departments now, and then you'll see some of the other departments like water and sewer, and you'll see airports, and some of those will be the last pulling up the non-public safety entities. But we're right in the middle of it, and we should have everyone on probably in the next 3 months is what we're expecting. So we will probably come forward and figure out some kind of ceremony to do, whether we call people from around the county with a handheld and see where we can, the fact that you can talk to everyone. And one police department could talk to the sheriff, which could talk to EMS. We never had that capability, and it couldn't come at a better time ahead of hurricane season this year. The new Domes facility, that's progressing. We haven't, we're turning some dirt for the phase one, the initial site work we're moving forward on, but the building hasn't gone up yet, but we're working through all that. We're negotiating final prices. Jason's serving for us as lead on that construction committee with representatives from three other counties. And so that's progressing. Project Opal, we're moving forward on the infrastructure project out there. Project Opal, you're going to hear a lot more of. It goes before the Triumph Board on the 23rd. We're working on now agreements for the long-term land lease, option agreements, long-term purchase agreement. We're working through all the consultants that we have to hire and procure through the Triumph grant. We have to do all that publicly, so we're drafting all those documents. I was working on that today while we were meeting today. So all those are progressing. And I skipped over the new corrections facility. You heard Mr. Autry talk about the land. I think once that land gets settled, we'll be able to move forward quickly on that facility. We've already started down the design road, and I think all that's progressing as well as could be expected right now. And I think you're going to hear a lot more about that throughout the remainder of this calendar year. So
you mentioned Shoal River Industrial Park, the infrastructure project. It's looking great out there, by the way. The asphalt that's down, the curving that's down, it's really beginning to take shape, and you can tell that something is coming.
Yeah, and I think that's, Commissioner Mixon, you raised a great point. I think that's really setting the table. I don't know that we've gotten to this level. We've talked about Show River forever. I've heard, and some folks in this room said, yeah, we've been talking about it for 20 years. Yeah, we've never bought the property. We've never installed infrastructure. We've never made the investments. And I think with this Project Opal and the Central Maloney project, as these projects start to take off, I think you're going to see a snowball effect and things are going to really move out there. So.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No, sir. General fund reserves? 25?
Yes, so Mr. Hofstad touched on this earlier. Your policy that you approved a few years ago asks or has a policy recommendation that the general fund reserve level be no less than 2 months of annual audited expenditures. And so what we do each year is we assess the audited financials and look at that reserve level to ensure that we're meeting those 2 months of regular general fund operating expenditures. So we went through that exercise and we have approximately $6.4 million in excess of that required minimum level. And per the policy, the board can utilize those funds for various purposes, including using it to balance the budget or for capital needs and other needs. At this time, we do not recommend allocating the excess amounts. Given the current economic climate, we feel that our current reserve level and the assignments that we've made within the reserve will adequately cover some of the capital needs and other projects that we've got identified over the next fiscal years. And so in essence, just because we recognize that our revenues are slowing, we feel like it's good to just hold the line on that reserve policy at this point. And so that would be our recommendation at this time.
I agree with that, Chairman. Just wanted to say that. Thank you. I'm glad that's where you went, because I'm concerned also about where the economy may go. We're slowing down. We'll see. We'll just see.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the last slide before we get to our schedule is millage rate. I have this discussion with you every year. We've had this discussion for 2 hours today. Certainly my recommendation, going back on some of the things Sheila said and what you've heard today, there's a lot of market volatility right now, a lot of unknowns. Our revenue projections have remained fairly firm here for the first part of this year, and I hope that continues. But based on that, it's certainly my recommendation that we hold the line on the property tax millage at 3.8308 mils, and we do the same with our MSTU millage at 0.299 mils. So that's what will be recommended out of the administrator's office. That will be what your budget is predicated on as we work to build this budget over the next couple months. So welcome any feedback on that. If not, that's certainly our plan going forward. And then, lastly, the budget schedule. I just want to make one correction on the budget schedule that's before you. It notes down here, the board sets proposed millage rate, and we identified Monday, July 22nd. That's actually Tuesday, July 22nd. That'll follow the budget workshop, our budget review workshop earlier in the morning. And then we'll have to set that tentative millage rate that same day. So I just wanted to make that correction to the schedule. And then the last slide just covers the budget workshops and what functions of government we will cover during those 2 workshops. So I'll tell you, we went from, a few years ago, we had 4 budget workshops, and we condensed that down to 2. That is covering a lot of ground over those 2 workshops. So I would certainly expect this commission that we will have to sit through a few hours of budget presentations, but we're trying our best to get that done timely, get you through all those presentations where we can solicit your feedback and then spend the month of August preparing your final budget. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the board's feedback today. Appreciate your feedback on the millage rate, the COLA discussion, the health benefits discussion, nonprofit funding, the various discussion points we had today, ERP discussion, even though that's not something I know a whole lot about. My ERP program is payrolling, and that works pretty well for me.
Payroll.
So certainly, but I appreciate your feedback on that. And based on your direction today, we will work hard over the next several weeks building a budget for you. Thanks, sir.
Mr. Ofsted, do we need HR to come back with an agenda item to be able to discuss the employee-based evaluations? Or is that something that we're going to do in a workshop?
I give us a chance to kind of study that and talk with you individually, and I would suggest we have that discussion during our workshop.
Okay.
Jim.
Commissioner Ketchum.
Just a quick, no further discussion from my point, but I know in the back of our mind, we're all kind of waiting to see what the legislature does with ad valorem and the homestead exemption. From the word I'm getting, the homestead exemption is going to increase, which will make homeowners happy, but we're going to have to try to figure out, the loss of money somewhere.
Yeah, and that's the exercise we go through every year. And, those of us that own property in this state, we're certainly happy anytime we get an additional exemption, but someone that sits in my seat and our staff out there and you as our legislative body, we've got to make all that work. And, I can tell you the cost of materials, the cost of construction, based on market volatility right now, I don't know what we're going to be paying for equipment and vehicles here in the coming months. And so all of that has an impact on the budget. I've not seen the budgets from the constitutional officers yet, so I don't know what their ask is going to be. And certainly, as you all know, a large percentage, the overwhelming largest percentage of our general fund budget goes to support public safety. So we'll see where all that stacks up, and we will bring a balanced budget to you in July and wade through the board's priorities at that time. So thank you.
Commissioner Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start with probably what's easier one first. On the board's proposed budget schedule for the July 22nd meeting to set the proposed millage rate. It's set at 11 a.m. following the budget review meeting / workshop at 8:30 a.m. Is there any reason they can't just be set concurrently at 8:30, one to stop right after the other? Lynn, judges do cattle call hearings all the time. Everybody shows up at 9, you go when your number's called. So can't we just set them at 8:30? That way, if we're done at 10:30, you don't do this, walking around waiting for 30 minutes to reconvene, just get on with it. Is that legal?
There a reason why we said it separately?
I'm not sure.
I mean, the only ones I know that have statutory requirement on them are the hearings, and they can't happen before 5 o'clock, but I don't know there's any restriction on that.
So we'll reflect the change to 8:30 on Tuesday, July 22nd.
So I got that. Okay. While I'm thinking of that, and I failed to mention it when I was going over the budget schedule, if you'll notice on there, the tentative budget hearing is set for Thursday, September 4th. We would normally do that on the Tuesday that you have your regular BCC meeting, but in accordance with the truth and millage, we cannot hold that before the 3rd of September. So unfortunately for you, you're going to have 2 meetings that week, one on the Tuesday, followed by, that tentative budget hearing on Thursday. So that's why that's set the way.
Super exciting to see the 5 p.m. one in Crestview. That will be lots of fun to get to. I will be sharing the pain of so many of our constituents who
I'm excited
who do that every day. So, it's good for the commissioners on the south end to feel that every now and then, I think, just to remind us how important roads are. That said, so here's the one that I wanted to bring up because it's something that is, I think, significant and one that I really like to look at. Now's the time to look at it because this is April. We're talking about the budget. We're talking about the budget policy. I am 100% in agreement with keeping the general millage rate at the same rate that we talked about. The one I really want to look at is the one that I probably get more complaints than I ever expected to, is the unincorporated parks millage. It's a small component, right? But of course, the argument you get from some is, well, just because I don't live in a city, I pay an extra county tax. Well, yes, and there's a rationale for it. And it serves a good function. stormwater being one, parks being another. And so I think it is a reasonable revenue source to maintain for the county. However, what I would like to see, and this is going to take an extremely intentional effort, and it's going to take a lift, but I think it's doable. I think that we could look at offsetting some of that rate, some of that millage, that property tax, by starting to focus on user-based fees. We don't charge for parking at any of our facilities. And I'm not talking about like at our OCAB facility, but I'm talking about our beach accesses. I'm talking about at, the convention center and other places where I think people will pay for parking. Cities are already starting to do it in our community, and they're generating a lot of revenue, and that's a lot of revenue that some of it comes from locals, a lot of it comes from tourists, but at least it's not coming from property taxes. And I think there's other user-based fees that we could think about. Entrance fees to some of our recreational opportunities. The state does it. It doesn't have to be a punitive amount, but I think it actually would add up to a pretty good amount of money. Now, what I'm saying is, I would only want to reduce that rate by an amount that we could foreseeably replace with income revenue. So I'm not saying cut the budget. I'm saying rethink about how we get the money. And I'm not saying cut that tax out. I'm saying let's start taking a little bite out of it. But if we're going to do it, it's going to take a lift. It's going to take some work. But if we're going to do it this year, now's the time to start. If we don't start now, it won't be this year. And honestly, I'm bringing it up because I want to see how the board reacts to the idea of starting to implement more user-based fees and in exchange, a little bit more relaxation on our property taxes for those who live in the unincorporated. So that's a concept I'd like to pursue. I think it would then force us to start looking at, things like I said, paid parking in certain areas, especially the tourism heavy areas. There may be, and legal will have to get involved with this. It may be that some of that has to go back to tourism. Some of it can come back to general fund for parks and stormwater. I'm not sure. I don't have all the answers, but I think if we don't look at it very intentionally, we will never get there. So that's one thing I would like to look at as we go forward. And if there's a consensus of the board to allow staff to start moving in that direction, that would be my request, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sure that'll be a fun discussion in the future. Commissioner Ketchel?
So Commissioner Goodwin, I'm tracking. I'm just wondering, for instance, like, let's take Cinco Bayou. We just acquired it. There's been issues we talked about this morning I had to leave, but I don't know where you ended up with that, but there's been issues with the pier. So how much would we charge, for instance? What's in your mind to charge for the use of Cinco Bayou to use the water there?
Like, you talking about parking fees and launch
Parking
fees?
and launch fees, yeah.
Well, I think the simplest thing to do is look at what our sister communities are doing that are already doing this, right? So it's pretty prevalent from Marathon up to, frankly, Destin, charging for these type of things. And so I think, launch fees are, $5 to launch your boat, something like that. It's not punitive. Some places have it where you can sign up with you leverage technology, right, for a lot of this. And so you can sign up for a resident discount or maybe a resident card. You get a certain number of launches and whatever. It's all controlled through the computer system. So you can give a benefit back to your locals, but it doesn't have to be an excessive amount. And so what I would do is I would ask staff to look at what other communities that are similarly situated are doing, and run some analysis on what kind of fee generation that would come back with that. Every asset's going to be a little different. You bring up that particular boat in the town, that boat ramp in the town of Cinco Bayou. We know that if we generate funds there, we're going to have to share some of it back with the owner of the ramp, which is the town of Cinco Bayou, but we'll still get some. And it actually has another benefit that I didn't bring up. Huge benefit in offsetting a property tax, but the other benefit is it starts to give us data on who's using our facilities, and it will significantly help in being able to track illicit commercial use or unauthorized commercial use, because we know that the guy that's launching 10 pontoon boats every day is probably not just enjoying Crab Island that much. and that he's probably running a business there. So it would give us data control. I think it would actually not only help offset property taxes, I think it would help us make our assets, our venues, our attractions more enjoyable by the people who want to use them in a responsible way. So that's kind of my sales pitch
I'm
on
willing
it.
to explore it. I'm willing to explore it for a couple of reasons that you didn't even mention, but we've got some, yeah, I'll just leave it there. That's great.
So, Mr. Ofsted, we'll explore it more than likely prior to the July workshops. That's a little late in the game to get on this budget. So we'll talk towards June. We have a meeting there in the middle. We'll look at calendars to see where this would fit.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting concept and we will certainly look at it. I think that's a good direction to take. But you know, I want to give a little history here. We have an MSTU because of a court case dating back to the 80s when the municipality sued the county over duplication of fees. So you have we distinguish in this county between what we refer to as unincorporated parks and county parks. Much of what the commissioner speaks to are the county related parks where that's a component of general fund dollars, property tax dollars. So a lot of these parks that we have that are high traffic parks are either county parks, or we further define those as tourism related parks and they're funded with tourism dollars. So there's a lot of moving parts here. The other thing is the mechanism that's put in place to establish this. And I would think, Lynn, that it would probably require an ordinance revision because it is fee based. So there's several steps we would have to go through. It is certainly worth exploring. I just don't know if I can have all those answers for you by, June timeframe, but we will certainly work toward that end to see what we can come up with.
Great. Any other comments? All right, meeting's adjourned. Workshop